sure God power. Get everything you ever wanted and live the life of your dreams. The Master's Course. Copyright 2010 by Richard Lee McKim Jr. All rights reserved. Let the quest for knowing begin. Vicki Nortuck's story in her own words. A Blind Woman's Near-Death Experience by Vicki Nortuck. Between 1947 and 1952, 50,000 babies were blinded by excess oxygen given to them in the newly developed airlock incubator. One of the clues to this tragedy was the discovery of the loss of peripheral vision among pilots breathing oxygen through air masks. I had been in the womb 22 weeks by December of 1950 when I was born at St. Luke Hospital in Pasadena, California. Weighing 3 pounds at birth, it was logical that I would be placed in one of the new incubators. Since then, for 43 years, I have seen no light, no shadows, nothing. The optic nerves to my eyes have been destroyed. When I dream with the same sensations I experience when I'm awake. There is no visual data. Other sensations such as touch and sound. But I have seen as you see. Twice I nearly died. And on those occasions, for the first time in my life, I saw. I left my body and saw. This is an account of my second near-death experience. On February 2nd, 1973, I was working as a singer and pianist at a restaurant in Seattle, Washington. It was 2 a.m. The owner, afraid of offending a drunk couple that had offered me a ride home, overruled my objections and insisted that I accept their offer. He refused to open up his office so I could get some change for the payphone to call a cab. He left, and no one else was going my way. I reluctantly accepted the ride. As we drove along, the driver mentioned he was seeing double. The VW bus weaved through the streets. Near the base of Queen Anne Hill, there was a squealing of tires and we spun out of control. The driver's wife yelled, "Oh my God, we're crashing!" Everything became very slow. I screamed. That was my last conscious, in-the-body awareness. Dazed and disoriented, I felt myself leave my body through my mouth. Time still seemed stretched and elongated. I was rising into the air above the street, confused. I saw my body briefly. There was an uncertain moment when part of me wanted to go back into it, but another part of me felt so neat being out. Then I returned. It was like returning to your house when you forget something. I don't remember the trip to Harborview Hospital. My first awareness in the emergency room was being up near the ceiling. I could see again. Through this near-death experience, I was in a state of stunned awe from seeing. In fact, it was so foreign to me that it was a continuous complication in my efforts to cope. But it was also like a foreign language that you don't understand, but that you ache to hear more of. Below me was a body on a cart I wasn't sure was mine. I was shocked and aghast. The hair length was mine, and a lot of it had been shaved off. This may not make sense, but it took me a long time to grow, and I loved my hair. It was like losing an important part of me. Blood caked the skull. Nearby, I clearly saw a female member of the medical team. I felt drawn to her, and I can't explain why. But I had a great need to get her to understand me. Then I heard a male voice say that there was blood on my eardrum and that I might be deaf. "I'm not deaf! I'm not deaf!" I was screaming at him. Maybe she could tell him. "Don't you hear me? I'm right over here." At this point, while the visual impressions floored me, they were secondary to my desire to communicate verbally, because that's the main way I've navigated through life. Then the vegetative state. I yelled at her, "I'm not in a vegetative state." I was so frustrated and angry because I was yelling with every ounce of my strength I had, and it was like I didn't exist. I just wanted to get out of there. Almost immediately, as if in response to my thought, I was drawn up, sort of vroom, right through the ceiling, and then the hospital rising through space. I saw lights. I don't know what they were from, but I didn't care, because I felt so free. I was giddy with the ease of movement I felt as I rose. I felt like screaming and shouting with intoxication. This might sound crazy, but it reminds me of the feeling a puppy might have when it rolls over the grass and doesn't care where it's rolling. In the distance, I heard the most beautiful sound, like wind chimes. It contained every single note you could imagine, from the lowest to the highest, all blended together. As a musician, I was intrigued. There were so many different tones that I didn't know were possible. I was awed. Sucked head first into a dark tunnel, I was drawn by the wind toward a distant light that grew. There was a whooshing, airy feeling, as though great, big, monstrous fans were drawing me. The tube was comfortably wide. Occasionally, I passed what looked like vents or windows in the sides of the tube. Through these I could see other beings, both ahead of me and behind me in parallel tubes. They seemed to be expressing the same amazement I was experiencing. Inside, I felt warmth throughout my being. As I neared the end of the tunnel, the light became brilliant. Just before I reached the end, I could hear people singing. It was like all the hymns you've ever heard sung at once and blending together harmoniously. I noticed that there were no hymns about Jesus dying or sad songs of blood and pain. These were songs of praise and jubilation. As I listened, I could pick out an individual piece. Somehow their combined singing was beautiful, not horrible. It was like what could be made in order there could be made in order here. The jubilation filled me. My exit from the tube can be best described as rolling out into grass in a balmy, bright summerland scene of trees where there were thousands of people singing, laughing, and talking. Some played what sounded like string instruments. Flowers were everywhere in different varieties, and I still recall a near jasmine scent. Both the flowers and the birds I observed in the trees seemed to have light around them. I also noticed that even among flowers and birds of the same kind, some had more light than others. At intervals, ornate pillars supported what looked like roofs, creating park shelters. In the distance, a huge gate glowed, the brightest object in my field of vision. Then I saw Debbie and Diane coming toward me from the right, and Mr. and Mrs. Zilk approaching me from the left. I had been very close to Debbie and Diane at the Oregon State School for the Blind. Debbie had died from a hydrocephalic condition when I was 10. Diane had drowned in the bathtub next to my room from a muscle spasm 4 years earlier. Even blind kids can be cruel, and because Debbie was quite overweight, moved ponderously, and didn't talk very well, and because Diane would curse frequently at people, they were both shunned and made fun of by other kids. I felt sorry for both of them and reached out to them because of that. Miss Zilk had been an elderly, next-door neighbor who babysat me when my grandmother had to work. She had been a real sweet woman who went along with a lot of my imaginative playtime stuff. Debbie and Diane moved towards me gracefully. Both of them seemed to be healed inside or somehow made better. I could feel them reaching out to me with love. Diane seeming to have an almost desperate desire to say something.
Richard will continue Vicky's story on the next segment, number 38. To continue, go to How to Use Your God Power, chapter number 10, segment number 38. Let your quest for knowing continue.